Quantum Marketing Radio, the marketing podcast for insurance agents and financial professionals.
Welcome back, Quantum Marketing Radio listeners. We have a really special treat for you this month with special guest Kevin Hogan. He's actually one of the world's premier experts in body language and subliminal influence and persuasion. I think you're going to find some really useful tidbits. What's more interesting is because the conversation was so engaging and so interesting, Kevin actually agreed to let us do a second podcast episode with him. So this is a special two-part series. And what you're going to hear today, of course, is the part one of that interview with Kevin Hogan, and I think you're going to enjoy it.
And welcome to another episode of Quantum Marketing Radio. I'm your host, Louie Hillman, alongside the Leverage Marketing Guy.
Hey, Jeff Thompson here.
And we have a treat for you today. I'm going to let Jeff introduce this guest. He is a big fan of our guest today and has read several of his books.
Yes, that I am. Very excited for our guest today. For those of you who haven't heard of him, Kevin's the author of 22 books. He's best known for his international best-selling book, The Psychology of Persuasion, How to Persuade Others to Your Way of Thinking. He's the body language and unconscious influence expert for the Wall Street Journal, Fox, ABC, and the New York Times, as well as numerous other media outlets. Welcome, Kevin Hogan.
Thank you. It's really good to have you guys here at my home today, and it's nice to be on your podcast, and I'm looking forward to talking to your people out there.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being on. So, being an influence expert, I guess let's start off with, what is influence and why is it important?
The little baby cries. The baby is trying to compel you to do something, right? The baby does. And so everything the baby tells you, the little baby in the mother's arm is giving mom some information, right? And the baby says, she cries, and so you tried to feed the baby, and well, the baby still cries. So you were incorrect in your assessment, and So the baby, being compelling, is going to continue to ask until. And this is the great piece of advice that Dottie Walters gave me years ago. Dottie owned the largest speakers bureau in the United States for 20 years, and I one day brought the Psychology of Persuasion to her at the back of the room at an event. Well, that book came out, and I walked up to Dottie, a little 5'1" woman, beautiful, sweet lady. And I said, Dottie, I'm only making, this much money per event, and I'd like to make, twice or three times as much. And she looked up at me and she says, well, honey, have you asked? And I was like, no. And then she looked at the title of the book and she says, well, honey, you ask. They'll say yes. They'll like you. Really. Do it. I gave her a big hug and a kiss. That was the best advice I ever heard. And so we went from 2,500 to 5,000 to 10,000 to more. And it was really wonderful, just little things like that. So the baby keeps asking until. And that's the first great piece of advice that people can have. And that's what influence is. Every piece of communication is all about the influencing and persuading of another person. Honey, I'm going to the store. You're actually asking for permission and also making sure it's okay. And you're also saying, hey, would you like to tell me if there's anything you want from the store? So communication, you could argue that all communication is influence. Is it effective? Generally not. But that's where we come in.
Okay.
You've made a career out of the effectiveness of persuasion. What was your interest in the topic? And what was that breakthrough moment in your career where you realized this is something you could understand and explore and help people be more effective at using?
Three short stories, short versions of stories. The first was when I was a little kid, 11, 12, and 13 years old. My father had died, and we were living in Chicago, very poor. And I did anything I could to start business, and eventually we started to sell greeting cards. And so my mom bought Cheerful House greeting cards, which was really kind of cool because then I got to knock on the door of everybody in the neighborhood and in those neighborhoods where people didn't know me. And I was just a little kid. I'm still just a geeky little kid, but I was a geeky little kid then. And I found out that how close I sat to stood to somebody, or how far I would come back after knocking on the door, just as a little kid, would determine often whether they would open the door. And then when I walked into the person's house to ask the lady if she would want to buy the greeting cards, I found that if I had the booklet in her hand that she could be looking through, I noticed that people would buy more often than if I was paging through it for them. And so at this bizarrely young age, I became amazingly geeky about all the little nuances of selling greeting cards, because we needed the money really bad at home. When I got to college at the University of Wisconsin, I took a nonverbal communication class with a professor that was a genius when it came to coming up with ideas. And here I was, 20 years old perhaps, and she said, here's what project I think would be cool for you, because I always dress in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt pretty much. That's pretty much a guarantee. And she said, why don't you go to Keepsake Diamonds, or whatever it was called in those days, Kay's Jewelers, and purchase a diamond. See what the largest diamond they will open up out of the safe for you is. And then go back the next day with whatever suit and tie you can muster up and see if the diamond at another location in the Twin Cities, what would it get you? And it turned out that when we went to the store, Jim Jacobson, my friend, and I went to the store with the suit and tie, we were able to get as much as a $50,000 diamond out. And it was about 3 carats and 3.5 carats, and have them show it to us. But when we were there in jeans and t-shirt, they wouldn't pull out anything over $10,000. That was the next experience. And the final piece that really got me ecstatic about, especially the nonverbal communication pieces of influence, everything from how close we sit together to whether I lean into your communication, and all of those things that nobody ever thinks about, all the nuances. What does this specific gesture mean like that? I started to study the little things, and some of the biggest discoveries I've had were because of exactly just meeting with people like you guys like this in rooms, and all of a sudden I realized, it's interesting. Why is it that this gentleman over here is more attentive, say, than this gentleman over here? Why is it that this woman over here is actually liking me more than that one? And we were able to know that because I literally would ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you? Now, just so you know, we've got, is it Jeff? Yes?
Yeah.
Jeff is off to my left, and I'm off to his right, which hypothetically should mean he's having a pretty good experience because it's all logical. There's no emotional gunk going off in his brain. Where Louie over here, who's I'm off to his left side, that means I'm talking basically to his right brain. So he's got all kinds of feelings and emotions wrapping around stories in his mind. Stories, by the way, almost always are negative. So he's like, oh yeah, I've been in this interview situation before, and it's a tough one. So if I had you guys write down a number, just for the heck of it, would be like 7 and 5 or 8 and 6, as opposed to how comfortable you were in the situation. And if you look across at your partner here, you'll see that he's seated substantially more comfortably than you are. An interesting irony. So, just so you guys on the podcast know, that's exactly what. And of course, now we have everybody's changing now. So anyway, so that's really what triggered the fascination, and that's why I wrote The Psychology of Persuasion in '96 and then Science of Influence in '02. Written a few influence books since then. The publishers like them, but that's sort of the genesis of all of it.
Oh, that is fantastic. I should note Jeff does have the comfy couch, and I had to pull over the.
This is a true statement. So those are mitigating factors.
Environmental factors.
Exactly. Also important.
Yep. So our audience is mostly insurance agents and financial advisors. What are the important things that an agent can do to become more persuasive?
All kinds of things. The recent one of the people I consult with entrepreneurs, basically some are agents, and people like to create their presentation, which I think is fine, but instead of creating a presentation, why don't you develop a way to ask questions, to talk to people? One of the stories that I have, I don't sell insurance, and I probably never will, but one of the great stories that I've told everybody is when I was a kid, I told you my father had died, and had he left life insurance of any amount, we would have been able to have a survivable income and not be threatened with being orphaned at 11 years old. So people really don't need a pitch. They really need to just think, what is this person expecting out of me? What are they anticipating I'm going to do? And then what am I going to do that's a little bit different? So I surprise them. So I make them think just a little bit deeper about what I'm going to say. So for example, I might say, have you ever known anybody in your life that passed away and didn't leave their family enough life insurance to cover all the bills and take care of their kids through college? Perhaps it's no, but I do. And I can tell you that it's really tough. So when somebody passes away, it's really important that you, as an agent, that you would have a story like that. But even more important than that is my ability to ask you a question. Say, here we are, talking about life insurance, and I can show you a million products. I can show you universal and whole life and term and everything. But all of that stuff is pretty meaningless. What really matters is what can I do for you that's helpful? Can I ask you 10 questions? Can I ask you 7 questions? It's like, how many kids do you have? And how old are they? And can I ask you, I hate to ask you, but how old are you? If you're 54, then you have 26.3 years left on your, life expectancy table.
Yeah.
So we can cover all that. And so just so you know, you're going to live 26.3 more years, which, by the way, is pretty good. So as we talk a little bit, people can laugh and they can have a real engaging conversation. And then you can say, okay, based upon this, I could show you 50 plans, or I could give you 2 that I think are useful ideas. I could show you 1 whole product, which, honest to gosh, in this situation, I don't think is your best choice. And because you just don't have the money necessarily to do it. But I think that a term, which we could later upgrade a couple of years for you guys, so maybe a 10-year level premium term would be great. Can I show you what the numbers would estimate out to be on that? You can never believe an insurance estimate. Just let me just tell it to you, and then I'll print it out on the computer and send it to you. We don't ever, you can't 7%, 10%, 2%. I don't want to kid you with the numbers. How about I just tell you what I think it's going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Just talk to people like they're human beings. It's amazing what just that does.
Rather than focusing on the numbers or the product.
People aren't numbers people. They really aren't. They really want to connect with Louie and Jeff and Kevin. That's what they really want.
So I've heard sales trainers say this, and I'm curious what your position is on it, that people make their decisions 100% emotionally and then support it with logic. What would you say to that?
I would say that's partially true. Before you walked in the door today, you guys knocked on the door and you had an idea of what Kevin Hogan would be like. And in fact, before you walk in the door, you have a perception of what the situation is going to be. We're going to go to Kevin Hogan's house, we're going to talk to him and hang out for a while. That could be all of these possible experiences we would have. So I will behave this way. So that plays into your decision, yes or no. Also, what's my name? It's Kevin. What if it was Wilbur or Jennifer or Xenia, my son's girlfriend. So all of a sudden, it's like the name biases you as to the communication that you're going to have. Which, by the way, as an agent, you should be terrified of this, because the person's name is going to bias you and how you communicate with them, and you want to step back from that bias. That goes into my decision-making process, because I'll feed off of the energy, the emotion that you give me. Now, once you're here and once we're in the situation, now the very next thing that's going to decide is, I've already decided no. I did an experiment one time. We took a gold coin around Egan. Egan is a small town here in the Twin Cities, about 60,000 people, and I had a buddy of mine, Scott, and we walked around my McMansion neighborhood, and we basically just walked up to people's doors, knocked on the doors, and had Scott say, gold is at $1,253 an ounce today. We'd like to sell you this coin for $750. Every single person said no.
Wow.
Every single person.
Interesting.
And then I gave him $1,500 cash. I'd been to Mystic Lake, which is a casino locally here. Well, the night before, I just pulled some cash off the table, $1,500. I said, here, sell this for $750. He's like, well, what idiot wouldn't do that? I said, there's not one person that you can sell this money to for $750. He says, well, that's ridiculous, because you could easily just take the $1,500, take half the money right out of there, and then give it back and walk away. But I was very comfortable, because this is called reactance. Reactance. In other words, I've already decided no, so you have no chance of making this sale. So Scott would go up to the door, knock on the door, hi, and I would tell him the names of each of the neighbors, and he'd say, I'd like to let you know that I'm selling $1,500 today for $750. And every single person, we did 20-odd people that day in the neighborhood, everybody said no. So that's reactance. So long before you have an emotion, long before you have a thought, you've already said no, because the barriers are so high. But I bet you might be interested in knowing how to get past that reactance.
That would be very interesting.
Because without it, you can't sell $1,500 for $750.
Good luck selling any life insurance then.
It's almost impossible. So what has to happen is something has to give you the ability to show that you're actually not giving a pitch, that you actually don't have a pre-canned presentation which you're going to then irritate every emotion and verify every fear that I have. Reactance means I'm afraid of the manipulation, right? Mm-hmm. So if I say, hi, I'm Kevin Hogan with State Farm Insurance. Been working there for 14 years. Sorry about that. Anyway, now all of a sudden I made one mistake, and now I'm human. And as soon as you become human, the person says, don't worry about it, come on in. And now all of a sudden...
Is that sort of an empathy thing? People are willing
Exactly. We've found that making one mistake, one guffaw, one little error, a flub, being perfect is exactly what doesn't work. Being imperfect and being flawed actually makes money for people.
It's
and
that
that's why
authenticity.
Exactly. Authenticity was what Jeff said. And that's right. The closer you can get to your real self, without maybe saying all the swear words and the irritating things you say to your wife, if you can do that, the probability of you making sales is going to go up. And eventually, as people see more of you and who you are inside, the probability goes way up. And so the little errors at the very beginning allow people's resistance to drop, because after all, if you have a perfected pitch in a sales presentation, it's perfect. You're designed to manipulate me right up to a yes, which is going to work about 1 out of every 5 times. But if you don't have that, but you have the same knowledge base and you are willing to make a couple of mistakes along the way, you're going to get 4 out of 5 instead of 1 out of 5.
So is that mistake sort of, is that an emotional reaction that makes you more likable? Is that the idea?
It is,
too,
because I'm already thinking as you hit the door. I mean, I made the appointment, so I'm not uninterested, right?
Yep.
I mean, I did make the appointment, which is kind of nice for you to know. In other words, there is a part of me somewhere within the non-conscious realms of my brain that says, oh yeah, I really do want to buy some insurance and I know it would be necessary. There is a piece of that in there, but it's being balanced. And so now it just comes down to the initial fear, and then it will be about the emotion. Then it will be about the story about my dad, for example, who passed away in 1974 when I was 11, or it will be because I love my family, I care about my kids, and I want to make sure they're taken care of should anything happen. And it really has so little to do with what percent you're going to promise me is going to turn around. And as you get a smarter buyer, they know that nobody can guarantee a percent anyway, so it's like, why bother even talking about it? Let's just talk about $250,000 level premium. And let's talk about the things that we can do without overwhelming me with options, which will kill every possible sale.
Yeah, we've seen that. And, having worked with agents for 18 years, I've seen a lot of them get mired in lots of little technical details because I think they like it and think that that's an important part of what they need to convey to a potential prospect. But really, it's more about that relationship and building that likability and trust and all the other elements of it.
And all that really matters. It's huge, yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit more? You mentioned when you were selling greeting cards, you would notice that the proximity to the person, their body language. What are some of the things that, simple things that an advisor can be looking for in these body language cues to maybe shift direction when somebody's telling them no with their body and, maybe standing far away from that little greeting card salesman at the door?
Yeah, so I'm going to just sit back for a second. Now, you two are both sort of sitting in. We've got all of us have our elbows on our knees, and we're just sort of all huddled around the microphone here. But I'm just going to sit back so you guys won't hear me quite as well. But I'm going to sit back. I'm going to cross my left leg over my right leg, and I'm going to put my forefinger up to my brow and my thumb on my chin. And now I'm listening. And now I'm not engaged.
Right.
And so this situation means that you actually have to go back too now. Most people will stay engaged, and right, exactly. So Louie he just replicated my body language. We call that synchronization in psychology. So did Jeff. And that's actually what you do. Now, that, by the way, triggers both conscious and unconscious. I'm aware of that. So now I become aware as your customer that I have actually caused something to happen here. Now I will determine if this is comfortable or not for me, because it's my house, it's my office, okay? So I will determine now. And as soon as I come back up closer to you, which means you're going to hear me a little better in the microphone, now about 5 seconds later, you can go as far in as I did, okay? And then you can resume that position that we were in, that sort of comfortable, easygoing position. And so, we can actually do that and draw. And that's really important as we get back closer to the microphone. And as proximity decreases between us, the probability for sale increases. But you can't be the person who goes first. The customer has to go first. Just like when I first wrote about this for Men's Journal, 18 years ago, every guy in America was, I talked about leaning forward into the conversation, and it'll help you, communicate better with women. And so every guy was leaning into the conversation at dinner, at the bar, I'm like, you guys are killing these poor women out there. Don't do that. That's not what I meant. What I said is if she leans into your conversation, then you lean into her, and then she likes you. And then she likes you. Because, as guys, we believe that if the woman just touches us, that she's in love, right? If she just touches our knee or our shoulder or bumps against us on her way to the restroom, men are very interesting creatures. Women are much better at analyzing body language than men are. So guys, when they touch you, it doesn't mean they love you. It just means that they ran into you on accident. Allow people to come closer to you when they want, and then you bend into the conversation. And then there's a lot of things you can do when you're in that position. Eye contact when I'm talking, you should have 100% eye contact, Louie, when I'm looking at you. If I'm talking with you, 100% of the time you're glued to my eyes, even if I'm sitting here looking at my shoes, okay? And it really doesn't matter. And then 50% of the time when you're talking, you should be at the floor and then back up. And I'm just going to demonstrate something which you guys won't see on audio, so I'll describe it. I'm now the salesman, that life insurance salesman. I've listened to my customer talk, and I'm looking over at Jeff now, and I'm looking down at the floor, and I am the salesman. So I'm not going to look 100% of the time right into Jeff's eyes as I'm talking, because if I look 100% of the time into Jeff's eyes, and he's the customer, he's going to start freaking out and wonder what is going to happen after this insurance meeting today.
Seems a little intense.
It's very intense, especially when it's me looking at you. I've been told it's like, Kev, you're going to kill me, right? Is that the deal? So no, I'm not, but that's what it looks like. So as we studied what's the right amount of time to look at people, this varies by culture. And African Americans like to look at each other more often than white America does. Europeans, in most, except for London, England is not Europe, I have been told many times. But in the rest of Europe, they like to look at each other a lot. But in London, not so much. And they don't want to touch you in London either. But in Paris, they will kiss you just for the heck of it.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So there's really interesting nuances, and you have to be attentive. But as I'm talking to you, I communicate information. I say yes, and I'm looking at Jeff right now in the eyes. And it doesn't matter whether he looks away or not. That's not relevant. What matters is that I'm looking at him. And that I look down for a few seconds, I collect my thoughts. Now, guys, you guys are at home or in the office or in the car. Just imagine that I was talking to Jeff and I have eye contact right now. And then all of a sudden I broke up and I looked at the ceiling or I looked at the lights out there. And then I came back to Jeff's eyes. Well, it looks really ridiculous. So when you're communicating with somebody, the most common place that people go is up. They look around, they see what's in the office, they see what's in the building. Don't do that. When you break your eye contact, always break down and then come right back up. Down and then back up. Down to the floor and back up. When you're talking, 50% eye contact is the average.
Do the dynamics of this change depending on if you're meeting the client in their space, in their home, versus them coming to meet at your office?
Yeah, so let's start with the question you didn't ask, and which was at your office. So your office is essentially like going to jail. So just so you guys know, if you want to put your client in jail, feel free to invite them to your office as often as you can, because that's how they're going to feel. So please go to their home, work with them in their home. They're comfortable. And if you've ever seen Big Bang Theory, you know that Sheldon has a spot where he sits. So the very first thing you want to do is say, hey, where do you sit? And they'll point. Because if you say, where should I sit? They'll of course say what?
They'll probably give you their spot.
They'll say exactly, because it's the most important. Anywhere you wish. Oh no.
Now they're uncomfortable.
Now you have just destroyed, there's no sale happening here today. So that's where you begin, right? You begin by finding out where nobody sits. At the dining room table, the unimportant people sit on the sides of the table. Mom and dad, the leaders, sit at the ends. And this is true for most situations. So that's where you begin. Now, so when you're at my home, and I have to now remember what the original question was, because of course we didn't quite get there.
I was just asking about if the dynamics are different, whether you're meeting the client on their turf or inviting them onto your turf as the agent.
I think the big thing before you answer that is that it's a huge advantage to actually meet on their space rather than your office, because you say it's like prison for them essentially.
Prison, guys, that's the term. There's two places you should meet a client, and only two places, and one is in their home and the other is at lunch. Okay?
Interesting.
And because at lunch you have, well, let's go back to the house real
Yeah,
quick,
yeah,
and then
go
I'll go
ahead.
to lunch, okay?
Yep.
So if you meet somebody at their home and you're smart enough to sit in their not chair, okay? The chair that's not their chair, the not chair, then you've actually got an okay start. And it's really important that you ask for a glass of water or something to drink, because you need the person to do something that's connecting you to them. So when you came in my home today, Louie, I asked you if you wanted a glass of water, and then I asked you guys over here if you guys wanted a glass of water. This is both like drilled into me for my whole life. But it's also tactically correct to do as a salesperson.
How do we do with taking spots?
Oh, you guys did great.
We didn't sit
This is
in.
my spot.
We didn't sit in your spot.
That would have
Okay.
been devastating.
This interview would have been off the
Short
rails before it even
interview.
started.
So I was on the cover of Benefit magazine in Poland, a group of people who sell insurance. And one of the things when I invited the interviewers, the newspaper, they have their own paper, their own publication. I said, hey, can I get you guys a Coca-Cola Light? And this is Poland. And Coca-Cola Light is rare there. And so I had the waiter bring in, the room service bring in 4 Coca-Cola Lights, me and 3 people, as if it took 3 people to interview me, right? So, but they were fans, right, which is cool. So I gave a Coca-Cola Light to everybody, and they said, why didn't you offer us water? And I said, how many other people have offered you water in your life? And they said, well, everybody offers us water. I said, exactly. So who are you going to remember? And so it made the front. I don't have the magazine here. I've got a couple of books on banking. But the magazine, that was the cover story. Why Coca-Cola Light might make a sale for you. Okay? So, and this, by the way, if you're at their house, and if you see that yellow ribbon over there with the word honor on the metal behind it, you can say, what is that? The probability is that it matters, right? So guys, if you're listening to the podcast right now, as opposed to not listening when you wouldn't have heard that. So there's a medal over here, and it says honor on the bottom of it. That's certainly not mine. I haven't won a medal in years. So obviously it's my son's, right? And so he graduated. And so you say, Kev, what is that all about over there? Who got a medal in the house? Oh, my son got that. What for? Oh, he graduated with honors. He actually just finished his 2nd year of college, even though he just graduated from high school. And now that's a story. This is the only thing that matters. If you listen to the story, you make a sale. If you decide that you want to talk about insurance, you're an idiot, right? So all you really want to do is find out about the medal, why he did it, how could he go to college, how do you get 2 years of college, your last 2 years of high school? I mean, that's just stuff that you and I never did. We haven't done that. So that's where you want to go. Now you make your sale or it breaks right there. So if you're in the person's house, there's so much information around you that you can use. Is it art? There's no art in my house. I don't know anything about art. There's not one thing on the wall. My son says, Dad, every time somebody comes to the house, they know that you think in terms of memories. And so everywhere in this house, you see a memory. But there is no art. Essentially, there might be one piece of art in this entire house. Everything else is a memory. And that tells you about something. You know, it's like Kevin's not so concerned about pretense. It's really more about the people in his life that matters. That's pretty useful information when you're talking to your client.
Especially in the life insurance business.
Right? Because you're at my house. Now let's just say though that you didn't come to the house here, and you should always bring something up that is of significance potentially. Like, why does Kevin have the Star Trek up on my? There's a big. I don't even know how to describe this. There's this massive wall unit here, entertainment center, that has. You can see there's 3 Star Trek series there. There's Big Bang Theory. There's the Dick Van Dyke Show, two greeting cards, which are clearly not for me. And then there's a couple of books on the ends. What do you bet that they mean something in a house that has 3,000 books in it? We have 3,000 books in this house, but there's 2 up on the entertainment center. Yeah. It's just begging you to ask, isn't it?
Right.
Okay. So, and please, you don't have to today because there's no time for these stories, which are both really cool. But if I tell you the story, I bought insurance today. Mm-hmm. Now let's go to the restaurant. It has to be a restaurant that is going to serve great food. It's going to have very few distractions. The restaurant's the best place to have a meeting to sell life insurance because you control a lot more than you think. The first thing is you control food. You control the fact that the person is going to eat. When people eat, carbohydrates go into the body. When carbohydrates go in the body, serotonin is produced. When serotonin is produced, a person feels less sad, less depressed, more likely to have positive affect and positive feelings. You're the person they're sitting across looking from. So now, instead of looking across from me at your office where you're in jail and you're the prison warden and you can let me out when you choose, Now you're actually at a restaurant where the person's actually feeling good inside, factually. You know chemically they feel positive inside. It's all about you. You have brought them here. You have given them food. You've put carbohydrates in their body. And that's when you start talking about business. 8 minutes after the carbohydrates have gone into the body, serotonin begins to be produced. And now you can comfortably say, okay, so I've told you enough about my kids, and I feel like I know your family forever. Can I get 5 minutes on insurance? Because that's really all I need. Okay? So let me ask you a question. You told me obviously your financial situation is pretty good. You're doing fine. You're working over at Cargill. You're the president, vice president next door. So everything's fine. So I think what I'd like to do is put you into something that's going to be tax-free when you retire. Okay? And I could ask you all the questions, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to tell you what I think is going to work best. I think you should be in a tax-free investment, so when you pull it out, you have absolutely no problem with paying the tax man, unlike every other investment most everybody's in. The next thing I think that we should do is put you in something that has a big buy-in today. This means, by the way, that I get a commission on that buy-in, which I think is a really cool thing because I'm helping you get tax-free at the end of the story. All right? Now, I've just shared with you, by the way, that I get paid out of this. I'm not doing this totally out of the generosity of my heart, right? And then I say what I would like it to do is I'd like it to be close to $250,000 to $500,000, whether this is an annuity or a life insurance product. And say, Mom, by the way, have I scared you yet, or is this all fine? Probability that you scared him is very tiny. So we'll say, no, I'm fine. Now, by the way, notice the question I asked. Have I scared you, or is this terrifying, or what? Did I say, are you comfortable with this? What
Opposite.
A stupid question. What a stupid question. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Johnson? No, I'm not comfortable. That has to be the answer to every question. So, am I terrifying you? No, of course not. Didn't I just say, right? No is the answer to the question with reactants, right? Mm-hmm. And so we ask a question that's going to get us no, but still lead us to the sale.
Right. The no still is a yes.
The no absolutely is a yes, and I got to say no to you.
Yes.
Honey, did you say no to him? I absolutely did. Okay? So remember that. So as we're sitting and talking, say, okay, so the way that this pays off over time, and you already know, you've been a VP in sales over there forever. You know that the payoff could be XYZ dollars. It could depend on what the market does any one year. We protect you in the years that it goes down because we buy options, against the policy price that you have. And so if your option goes down, we're in great shape anyway. We made money. We're fine. So you don't have to worry about us or feel sad for us. This, by the way, takes away the fear that I have, which everybody has that's smart, which is, okay, how are you going to guarantee me a break-even year in a year when the market goes down 22%? Mm-hmm. That's what everybody thinks. 90% of the people that are smart enough to know the question are going to know the question. So I can explain to you why it makes no difference whatsoever. We're buying options one way or the other. So we're protecting ourselves on both sides. So those are the kind of questions that you do and say, okay, so do you want to do $250,000, $500,000? I don't want to stress your budget, but at the same time, I want to make sure that you're good. And I also want to take money that you're not going to need for the next X amount of years. Let's make sure that it stays in there, that the kids don't get it until it's time for them to get it. All right? Your decision. Name a number.
$500,000.
Fine. Okay, so I do have one little folder here. This folder is an application. Would you take it, please, and fill it out for me? And I would do this, but I gotta eat. And I'm just gonna have some carbohydrates. So as he sits and fills out the application, say, by the way, if you get any questions there, let me know. This is good. By the way, did you like your chicken? Now you gotta say yes. It was good, right? It was good. So, okay, great. And so now you come back, say, now hold it before you sign. Do you have any questions that I need to know the answer to, that I can answer for you? Oh, no. Well, of course not, right? Buying $500,000, of course he already gets it, right? So now he signs, he gives it back to you, and everything is fine, and we have absolutely no resistance, no reactance. There's no discomfort anywhere. He's not terrified. He told us he wasn't terrified, and he was comfortable in telling you that he's absolutely man enough to write it on a piece of paper. Simple enough.
I noticed that when you stopped talking, you sat back. Is that, is that
I'm done.
Turning the conversation and turning that decision over to the client?
Right. So,
is that, talk to us about that. I want to hear more about that.
So for you guys listening as you drive to work or at the office, what I did when I asked the question, so here's the paperwork, fill out that page, that front sheet, and then sign it. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to eat. And I just sat back away from the microphone about 18 inches, and I just sat back and I just put food in my mouth. I just took a fork full of vegetables, and I'm just eating. And you now have to answer. You have to answer a question. You have to engage me.
I immediately felt some pressure to come up with a response.
Absolutely, especially on a podcast, right? So you're obligated. You are obligated to communicate to me.
But it was triggered by the body language and less by the question, I noticed. It seemed.
I sat back, I shut up, I said nothing.
Yeah.
And I just started eating. And a lot of times salespeople will shut up without having something to do. That's way less effective than if I sit back and I'm taking a bite of food and another bite of food and a sip of wine and another bite of food. Then I can say, is all good? Everything good? Yeah? Okay, cool. And I can have a couple more bites of my food. He comes up with a section, social? Do I have to put my social on it? You and me both. Yes, you do.
So I know we're coming up on a break here, but before we go, I've got one other question. I just want to go back to the office versus home versus restaurant environment. A lot of advisors think it's very important to have an office for perception, the credibility that they might get, but it's really not helping them, it sounds like.
Just imagine that you invited to meet this. Just imagine, we'll just do several here real quick. So option A, you go into an office that is this multi-billion-dollar building. It's 100 stories high, downtown Minneapolis, downtown Chicago, wherever it is. And it's just, the rent must be trillions of dollars a year on this place. And so now I see that my money's going where? Is it going into myself or is it going into a building? You lose from the get-go. What if you bring me into your building and your building is really sort of next to the dentist's office in a little cove over there in Eagan, and it's like just next door, and it's just this tiny little office. Nothing wrong with a tiny little office, but why would you bring me to a tiny little office where I'll be uncomfortable and I could actually either be meeting you at your home where you're in your safe environment and I'm the intruder that can be kicked out as opposed to you wanting to escape.
Right.
Okay? And so the answer is if you see people in their home, you better be either amazingly good looking, the most beautiful, elegant communicator on the planet, or really lucky, because the chances of you doing well are poor. But if you meet people at the restaurant, a nice place, somewhere they can have a couple of courses of food, a couple of courses, an appetizer, because you want carbohydrates early, just from a tactical standpoint, and then a meal afterwards where you can actually have somebody filling out a form. It takes about 5 minutes to fill out a form. It's a little awkward in the moment because normally you would fill it out, but just try it the other way and allow the person to do it themselves and enjoy the process. And no, don't meet them in your office. There's no good reason to bring somebody to your office. There's nothing that can happen at the office that's positive. And if I see something in your office that I don't like, which is going to be almost everything because you aren't me, okay? I was talking with my girlfriend the other day and she said, Kev, so when you were this religion, and how did you feel about that? Because I really don't feel comfortable with that. And I said, well, here's the deal. I don't really feel comfortable with this religion, but they're both Christian. Oh, so if you see something at my office, so you're going to see something that even though you think it's like you, it really isn't. But if I go to your place, if I go to your home, and I say, hey, Kev, you got one of those time capsules up there, right? What? Tell me about that. You can actually have a conversation that's intelligent, that means something to somebody. A conversation that means something to somebody. And as opposed to something about you and your diploma and your, yuck, gross, it's evil. Just, if you do it, it's your own fault.
So when you're in there, when you're in their space, you at least have the opportunity to establish that rapport on something that is maybe has some emotional tie that they're going to want to talk about, and it avoids you being the focus.
I've done business with Dennis Dunker, State Farm agent in Cannon Falls, Minnesota, for 33 years. 33 years. And over the years, he's become almost like a mentor. And he came to the house, my mom's house, and I bought my first policy. He didn't sell it to me. I told him I needed it because he asked me questions. And I said, well, tell me, what do I got to do? He says, well, you got to have 25, 50, and 100. 25, 50, and 100, and I'm like, what's that mean? Comp and collision, what's that mean? You gotta have PIP, oh my gosh, what does that mean, Dennis? And he said, what, some of this stuff replicates what's on your medical insurance, you don't actually need it, but everybody else will sell it to you. Well, don't give me that stuff then. I don't want that. I wouldn't do it either, but some people want to. 33 years at about, and I pay Dennis about 10 grand a year in total premium. No, more than that. 14 grand a year in total premiums for everything. So he makes about $1,400 a year from me. And if he had, 1,000 clients like me,
He's doing all right.
He retired at age 72 with more money than I can count. And I still love him. And the whole point is Dennis never sold me anything.
Well, that explains why you seem to know so much about insurance.
I've learned a lot over the years. It's a lot of fun, and I've worked with $1 Million Roundtable in the insurance industry for a long time. So I'm very familiar with your business, and I love your business, actually. I think it does a great service for people, and without it, people would be hurting, and I've experienced what it's like to not have it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break here, and we'll come back with more from Kevin.
Are you independent? Be part of the cutting edge in fixed life and annuity marketing for the independent agent and advisor. Discover the ECA Advantage, where you'll find the marketing systems, training, products, and expert support you need to take your business to the next level. Sign up now for your free ECA Advantage network account to get access to ECA's Knowledge is Power 2016 keynote video series, where Kim O'Brien discusses the DOL ruling. For more information, call ECA Marketing today at 800-356-4189 or visit our website, ecamarketing.com.